Indonesian agenda calendar booklet with phone numbers and so on, and it's from Indonesia, at least from the cover. Then there's an electronic, small 1978 little computer that also somebody left, and so that's there at the Portineria. Then there's a phone card from the Lika mobile company that hasn't been used, and so it's right there, whoever wants to claim it. There's a couple that missed 2 iPhones, so they're looking for their iPhones. So if you happen to see 2 iPhones, we need 1, we need 2, okay? And then a little bit more complicated, someone was given wrongly last night an Indiana driver's license. So they returned their audio, and they gave them the wrong identification. They gave them an Indiana driver's license from the United States. So please check under your documents and to see if you do not have an Indiana U.S. driver's license. So if you do have that, please give them to me. Okay? And also we have another announcement for the closing ceremony. Please.
Thank you. My name is Michael O'Connor. I'm a lay Dominican from Toronto in Canada, and I'm part of the group organizing the closing action on Saturday morning for the missioning of the order. And I have a simple request for volunteers to be part of a small schola to lead some of the singing on Saturday morning. The repertoire is very simple, 1 Taizé chant and 1 very simple antiphon. So 2 categories of volunteers are sought. First of all, people who would like to sing in the schola, who can sing soprano, alto, tenor or bass confidently and comfortably. And then secondly, cantors who would be willing to sing 1 verse in a specific language. So if you would like to sing a verse in Vietnamese or Dutch or Swahili, please see me. It'll be wonderful. The rehearsal will be after the panel session tomorrow, so 26 hours time from now. So short rehearsal, simple repertoire, general singers who can sing in a schola, and the specific people who would be willing to sing 1 verse of a psalm in their own mother tongue. Thank you very much. My name is Michael from Canada. I'll be around afterwards and this evening if you'd like to give me your name. Thank you.
Good evening. Good afternoon.
Welcome. We're going to continue, better said, to listen to our invited panelists for this afternoon. I have the pleasure of introducing the moderator of the afternoon session, our brother Jorge Scampini, doctor in theology and a professor. He has an ample CV, which includes having been provincial in Argentina. He is a member of the Faith and Constitution Commission of the International Council of Churches, specialist in ecumenism, and he looks at the conversion of confessional identities as a path toward the full realization of the unity of the Church. You may go to the cathedra, Jorge.
On this side.
And I have to say that our brother, Paul, who is the only Dominican friar, as far as I know, still present in Iran, who's not been able to come because he does not have the authorization to leave the country. In his place, we will see on the panel our brother Jean-Jacques Perrennet. Jean-Jacques Perrennet
es directeur de la
Jean-Jacques Perrenez is director of the École Biblique in Jerusalem. Before that, he was director of IDEO in Cairo. He was socius for Apostolic Life as well. Welcome, Jean-Jacques Perrenez.
Ahora le toca el turno al
Now, we have Professor Claudio Carvalhares, a doctor in theology, liturgist and artist from Brazil, ordained a presbyter of the Presbyterian Church, a man who preaches very creatively, committed with all liberation movements, also those pertaining to communities of color. He has taught in the Global Institute of Theology of the World Communion of Reformed Churches. And he is a member of the American Academy of Religions, co-president of the a group of arts, religion, and literature, and member of the directing council of, and also member of the North American Academy of Liturgy and the Homiletic Academy. And above all, happily married and the father of 3 children. Welcome.
We welcome Natalia Trouillet, a journalist. She worked in radio and transmedias. One could say that she's a woman communicator and Christian something. Natalia is also director of the Noe 3.0 to help Christians enter into the digital revolution that's going on right now, the present digital revolution and future revolution. Natalia is open to the future, but is something about evolution. Welcome.
Antes de comenzar,
Before we begin with the panelists, let's show the winning video of the videos on the Mass. So we have here the debut of the winning video and the Video OP Challenge.
un aplauso, ¿no? Han ganado.
Let's give them a hand of applause. They've won.
істину, і істина визволить вас.
Отче, я також хочу проповідувати істину, як домініканець-мирянин. Хочу бути як Фрасатті.
Good afternoon to all. Now we pick up again our work for the day, even though we, after the pause, after lunch, our work having to do, at least with the arts, has barely ended since the morning. We'd also like to welcome those who follow us through digital media and who make it possible for this place, this place of encounter may reach out and may extend even to unimaginable locations, for which reason we have the possibility of sharing together here every moment of this week. The shared topic is that of humanity. This morning, in the two reflections that introduced our work and that later was covered in the workshops, was that of encounter and dialogue. And we may add communication. In this area, we may find the three testimonies and presentations which we will witness this afternoon. The work will be similar to that which we had in yesterday's panel. First, a presentation by each of the presenters of approximately 20 minutes in length, and later there will be the opening of a dialogue to whatever questions might emerge by the participants here in the aula, and also those who may send their questions via Twitter or YouTube. For those who are following us through digital media, it is #OP800, the means to connect directly with what is happening here at this moment. I would like to present first our brother Jean-Jacques Pirenne, as Brother Javier has announced, is replacing Brother Paul Luller, who has not been able to participate during this Congress. And above all, what Jean-Jacques will present is his lengthy experience, not only as an intellectual topic, but a topic of a vital encounter with Islam. And since there are phrases that keep showing up through the decades, it would be interesting to recall an experience which occurred in the chapter of Bologna in '98, when Jean-Jacques was socius for the apostolic life. It was there was a project, a collaborative project of the two commissions of intellectual life and his commission. And this resulted in a document published as an appendix in the Acta of Bologna. And it's on mission as dialogue. And so Jean-Jacques' presentation is something that has matured throughout the years. And these are the fruits of this years-long work that we will receive this afternoon.
Good afternoon, dear brothers and sisters. I arrived in Rome 3 days ago. Brother Orlando, Socius for Apostolic Life, said to me, Jean-Jacques, can you please replace Paul Luller, who can't make it, who can't leave Tehran? I didn't dare say no, because I had been Socius for the Apostolic Life, and I know that it's difficult when we're organizing a Congress and of this kind to find a brother at the last moment. So I said yes straight away. Of course, yes. And at the same time, I don't pretend being able to replace Paul, even if I'm going to give you a word from him. My secret is to exhaust those who've heard me before in other chapters, and this morning. And this morning I was reminded of what a young Spanish brother said to me. He said to me, "You're a bit in the category of the old kind of relics." So, I would like to try to share with you an experience, since what I'm going to talk about has been involved in my life over 45 years. My first time in the Muslim world was as a very young brother in 1971, and today, even though I've left Cairo and Egypt, I'm still back again in Palestine in a context where I have to speak Arabic. I'd like to say something about Paul Lawler. So I had the luck to visit him in Tehran 2 years ago, and after speaking about it afterwards, I realized our Dominican presence in Iran is very little known. Did you know that when Ricardo del Monte del Croce was in Iraq, in Baghdad, at the end of the 13th century, he had already heard of the presence of Dominican friars in Tabriz, in the north of Iran, in Persia as it was then. And then after that there was, over many, the 8 centuries of the order, various Dominican presences, sometimes precarious, sometimes prospering. There was a province of Armenia which had many hundreds of religious missionaries working around the Black Sea and in Persia, while the Safavids took power in Iran, Persia, and they built the capital at Isfahan. The Dominican order had the chance to build there a church which still exists today. We have a Dominican church in Isfahan. And in the 20th century, the brothers came back, firstly English friars in the 1930s, and then around the 60s, some Irish, and Michael Brown, the master of the order. When the Nunziature asked for a Dominican presence, there were many brothers in Ireland, and he sent several. One of them became bishop of a Latin bishop of Isfahan and Tehran, Monsignor Bowden. Paul Lawler arrived as a young deacon in Tehran. He learned Persian. He very much loved the country, and he understood something of the way of life of those brothers at the time of the Iranian Revolution in 1979-80. They were all expelled. But someone kept the convent going. They had built a very beautiful priory in the center of Tehran, a priory with 12 rooms, a church, a large garden, a very beautiful place. And as soon as he could, Paul returned. In the meantime, he had been teaching here Christian archaeology at the Angelicum, because he has that background in education. So Paul returned to Tehran for a presence which, a very simple presence. Of course, it's a country where it's out of the question to be proselytizing, but at the same time, it's a country of great rich culture, a country with an Islam much more open than in other Muslim countries. As Iran is the country of Shiitism, the part of Islam which is much more open to interpretations and hermeneutics. This country has a history, a cultural history, that's very prestigious. And with my own eyes, I saw to what degree Paul, who knows well the Farsi language and knows the language, could develop bonds of friendship and encounter beyond the little parish, Latin parish, that he was managing. So I find that it's a great honor for our order to have a brother there, one brother there. And I suggest that we give him a round of applause.
Je ne vais donc pas le remplacer.
So I'm not going to replace him. I cannot, because his experience is not mine, even if I have greatly admired what he does there when I stayed with him many weeks. I'm going to talk to you about my own experience, in my own way of seeing. I don't like saying the word dialogue, interreligious dialogue, because often dialogue is just words, and words can trick us. I prefer the word rencontre, encounter. But in my brief presentation, which I prepared only yesterday, when the other is an opportunity for our preaching, I will try, therefore, as my first point, to turn around the main dominant idea that the other is a threat, especially when it comes to Muslims. I don't have much experience of a Buddhist other or a Hindu other, so I won't talk about that. But it's clear that today Islam is perceived as a threat, including in Western countries where there are not so many Muslims. It's perceived as threatening by people who have perhaps never encountered a Muslim. But in the collective imagination, Islam is dangerous. And so there are reasons, objective reasons for that. And sadly, the reality, the news of these last years has increased this collective imagination of jihadism, Daesh, and all the tragedies we've seen. But I will say that, in words more positive, that I would like to have more positive words on dialogue, and I would never forget the suffering of our brothers and sisters who live in these difficult countries. With Brother Bruno, who was here when he was provincial, I was the vicar provincial. And we had, for example, we were asked if we were going to pay or not a ransom for brothers. Do you remember, Bruno? And we paid a ransom in the end. This was a ransom, a preventative ransom. If we didn't spend $10,000, this would have, a brother would have been taken away, and it would have been many more thousand. We lived through this, and the two of us, the leaving of Mosul towards Karakosh, we lived through that, which we built. We lost everything. And so I'm saying all this so that you can measure the tears, the sufferings. I know this too. But it seems to me that we have to, as preachers, go beyond that. And we have to witness, at least this is in my own life, that the other can be an opportunity as well. I had the luck to live between the 80s and today, perhaps 30 years altogether, in Muslim countries, Algeria, Egypt 15 years, Iraq, now Palestine. And I had great happiness in all these experiences. Of course, there are difficulties, but I found that I had great fortune to come out of what Pierre Clevery, I know, like him much as you know, what Pierre Clevery spoke about as bubbles, our bubbles. He talked about his colonial bubble. He was in colonial Algeria, and he hadn't seen the Muslim other during his childhood. But we all have our Western bubbles, our Catholic bubbles, and I don't know what other bubbles, and we can stay in those, enclosed. So I found it's been a good opportunity for me to live with the other, and in a manner to be in a certain way a minority, because when we are in a minority, we can't permit ourselves to be arrogant, and especially ourselves, in the West, we are arrogant. So this fear of the other must force us to question ourselves. It exists in our society and in our communities, our Dominican communities. How many times has someone said to me, "So you're in this difficult country," without realizing quite how much I am enjoying my life there and how happy I am, because I've had so many friendships and encounters such beautiful moments of fraternity. So, first point, the other, is he a menace, a threat to me? I want to say that that is not the case. The other has been, to me, often a challenge and often difficult, but also a source of joy. Second point, this luck I've had. In fact, I'm not the first one, far from it, in the Dominican order, because since the founding of the order, since the 13th century, our brothers and then our sisters have gone out towards that Muslim other. I'd like to say something about Brother Ricoldo de Montecroce, a brother from Florence, who, towards the end of the 13th century, accepted to be sent to Baghdad to put himself to listen to the Muslims of that country, to learn Arabic in Mosul, in Syria, which at that time was a very great university, because that world knew had a great cultural past. He learned Arabic. He tried to understand and translate the Quran. We understood very little about the Muslim texts. And he did that with a certain trepidation, with a passion, and sometimes with tears. As he, when he learned in 1295 that his brothers in Jeanne d'Arc had been murdered, and he found the habits in blood-bathed habits, and he wept. He was all alone, and he has this beautiful text. Oh my God, what a great preaching I wanted to do in this festival day for this people in honor of your name. And now I'm not only alone, but I have no one to whom I can preach, and what consolation it had been to be preaching in this day. But he stayed. One day he came back to Italy, and others took it up. There was a congregation of Dominicans, traveling Dominicans with their base in Galata, where now we have the brother Claudio in Turkey. And they tried to throughout the whole region, America, Persia, founding communities, often coming with the merchants from Venice and Genoa, planting themselves, and there as well, they were trying to enter into the culture. They succeeded so well that a congregation of Armenians has joined the Dominican province, and this gave birth to the Dominican province of Armenians, with many hundreds of friars, and with all these communities in the 14th century, Esfahan and Tahiz and so on. The brothers talked to the Mongols, tried to establish something there. At the beginning of the 13th century, the first masters of the order, Raymond Peñafort and Humbert of Romance, created schools in Tunis and in Spain, schools of languages, so that the brothers could learn Arabic and Hebrew to go in those countries. And so, of course, they went into the difficulties of the era, the apologetics, converting, but they also tried to learn about them and to encounter them and to love them. And if you reread the wonderful Vitas Fratrum by Gilles de Frachet, you'll know that when we asked volunteers for the missions, Frachet says that the brothers wanted to go. They all wanted to go with tears. Please send me. And yet, this was the Mongols, the Tartars. It was difficult. So, in the second point, I want to say, to go towards the other is part of our genes, the DNA of a friar preacher. These are the cumens of St. Dominic. And I think we can't be in a Dominican preaching if we don't have this passion to go abroad, to see the other, to encounter the other. And here it's a question put to our provinces, our communities. Where are we What is our desire to go with this courage to other places? There were brothers of I've talked about the brothers of the Holy Rosary Province who knew that they would be murdered in the far-flung territories. This is part of our genetic code. Third point. We can be happy because we can make the other a partner and maybe even a brother. Pierre Clevery, whom I'm often quoting because I lived with him, and in the end, of course, he was a brother who gave his life. He's one of our latest martyrs, perhaps soon to be beatified. Pierre Clevery said, "We don't yet have the words we need for dialogue. First of all, we need to know one another, to learn to confront together difficulties together, and to learn to love one another. This is the dialogue of life, of which Paul Lawler would have spoken about, who can not convert people, because otherwise he'd be in the plane the next day. But, nevertheless, I know, because I've seen it, that he shares his joys and pains and projects and challenges and friendships. The importance of friendship. I spoke about this in the workshop yesterday, which I was facilitating. This presupposes that we are not arrogant, and often we are. To accept that we might be a minority, not always to be right, even though inside we think that we know we have the treasure that is Christ, but to accept that others too have their paths towards God, and we have to learn to respect, to go to the other, this experience of friendship. I would even say to dare a spiritual friendship, fraternity. In Rome, I was with a good friend, a Muslim friend, professor in Cairo, who's also doing a doctorate at the Urbana here, because he has this taste for the other, the Christian other, and never would he end a letter or an email without saying to me, "Don't forget to pray for me, my brother." And I ask the same thing of him. And I think it's very beautiful to be able to count on the prayers of a Muslim, and that he can believe in my own prayers. We are different. It's often painful, because the closer we get to the other, the more we see what Pierre Clevery called the abyss that separates us. How can we talk about the Trinity and this circulation of love in God? How can we listen to the admiration of our Muslim friend for his Prophet Muhammad without saying to him that for me his prophecy was really a matter very questionable? But how to say that without hurting him? So we don't have the answer. We're on different paths. And the answer is perhaps a kind of eschatological answer. One day we might know. And I would like to quote here a wonderful passage. In my view, one of the most beautiful contemporary texts on interreligious dialogue, which I take from the Christian de Chergé, the Prior of Tiberine, his testimony. This monk in Algeria who was assassinated in the spring of 1996, 2 months before Pierre. Brother Christian, their prior, had written a testament where he says this: "My death, of course, might seem to give support to those who see that who thought I was naive or unrealistic. How many times have people said this to me? Now may they say what they think. But these people must know that this will bring about complete my most penetrating curiosity, whether with God I can look at the Father and to contemplate with him his children of Islam as he sees them, all illuminated with the glory of Christ, fruits of his passion, clothed in the gifts of the Holy Spirit, of whom the secret joy will always be to establish a communion and to re-establish the appearance, playing together with these differences. This lost life, my life and their lives, I give thanks to God, who seems to have wanted completely that this joy, despite all. And Christian would say that, yes, sometimes in his monastery, Muslims would come and visit, and one day he realized that he is there in the chapel trying to pray, or praying, and here he heard behind us a Muslim also doing his prayer, and so they alternated, one after the other, and at the end Christian says, we stopped maybe around midnight. What a thing we've, after all these centuries of praying, to be able to have been able to pray side by side, not with the same words, but to be able to pray side by side to the same God. So that was my third point on the other, a partner, a brother, without exactly having the complete sense of what's going on in that encounter, which belongs only to God. And a final point, I'll be a bit briefer. I think that we, brothers and sisters, in interreligious dialogue, there is a theological challenge. In fact, I have the experience of this, and others here too, to come to respect the other, to love the other, and to feel their friendship towards me. But there's still the question, a really formidable question, of the plurality of ways towards God. I won't say again because I cited it yesterday, the text of Pierre Claverie called Plural Humanity, in which he says, I do not possess God in the sense that I don't have a total comprehension of God, but I need the truth of the others. But this is a text which Pierre has had throughout 6 months before his death, which he didn't elaborate theologically. And our Catholic Church is suffering struggling, really struggling to articulate this question of religious pluralism. If you look at magisterial texts, between Dialogue and Proclamation, for example, and Dominus Jesus, we hadn't at all a real coherence between those texts. There are some texts that are more open. There are others which, on the other hand, we feel a certain fear. We want to reaffirm strongly our own kind of points of reference. Think about the theologians who went into this territory and had difficulties. Claude Jeffrey, our brother, who spoke about differentiated revelations. This means that revelation comes through history and time in differentiated ways, meaning coming with a different kind of face or different appearance in different cultures and religions. Let's think of the difficulties of the Jesuit Jacques Dupuy, a great expert of Asian religions. So here I put the question, why are we so little present, theologically present in this question? Why are there so few few chairs on this question in our faculties of theology and so on? Of course, there are some efforts in the Mediterranean region with many Dominicans, but there are still very few in Asia, and yet that's an immense continent for interreligious dialogue. So I think there's a challenge to share, I wanted to share with you. I'll finish concluding by citing a text which I find magnificent by our brother Chris McVeigh. Chris, a brother I enormously admired, one of the most exceptional brothers that I've encountered in my Dominican life. An American brother. He spent all his life in Pakistan. He died a few years ago in the metro in New York. He was a formator, master, regent of studies, theologian, superior, vicar general. He did everything, and everything magnificently. He dared to live in that difficult country, Pakistan. So Pakistan is a difficult country. And he would say to me, laughing, if you want to get bored, come to Pakistan. If you don't want to get bored, come to Pakistan. And Chris left a wonderful text called Outside the Camp. I'll read the French translation. It's outside the camp that we meet a God who cannot be controlled. It's outside the camp that we can encounter the other who is different, and whom we will, through whom we discover who we are. In the gospel, it's always those living on the margins of society, those who live outside the camp, that Jesus puts forward as models of faith and action. The Syrophoenician woman, the Samaritan woman, the lepers, the women, publicans, prostitutes. It's outside the camp, in all of the Galilees that surround us, that we can meet this Jesus who comes to us and is waiting for us. To live outside the camp is to be in the mission. To live outside the camp is to live in a privileged place, to discover with the others who God really is and what does it really mean to be church. Because it is also outside the camp, outside the door, that Jesus suffered in order to sanctify his people by his blood. And it's along these fissures, fractures of humanity, that humanity suffers following on from him. So you find this text and other beautiful ones by Chris McVeigh in a good book written by our brother Prakash, dedicated, and our brother Kevin Toomey of Australia. There, I think I've said enough. I have so much good luck I'm a very happy Dominican, and I think it is linked to the ministries that have been given to me. Thank you to the order.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Jean-Jacques, for such a vivid and experienced contribution. It seems to me that in this context, this would merit, at the very least, putting forth two reflections. The first, having to do with the relationship with Islam, not only with countries, quote-unquote, external to historic Christianity, but also that it is a challenge that is faced with fear in Christian countries. And with what you have shared with us, in the first place, there emerges that the very same space where the fractures occur can also be the same possibility of a deeper encounter. And the second reflection is that in the complexities of the movements of the world, of historical movements, of the various religious expressions, we have to avoid simplifications in order to better understand all those complexities and realities. And perhaps those who best understand it and who best incarnate the gospel are those who are willing to be witnesses. And I believe that this, in light of the announcement, the news of the gospel, in the face of the challenges before us, is essential to discover the fractures with the possibility of encounter, and that the proclamation be incarnate and by witness. Thank you, Jean-Jacques. And now we move on to the second presentation of the afternoon by Professor Claudio Carvalles, who situates us in the context of dialogue with Islam, and if you wish, more broadly speaking, interreligious dialogue, more than that, in ecumenical dialogue. His contribution is also very important. It could be looked at as the importance of dialogue among Christians and the importance of the service that we Christians can, our contribution to a culture of encounter. I give the floor to Claudio.
Me, so I need to move and be in trance, so I would feel more comfortable here, so thank you. What a great joy to be here with you all. You have given me an immense gift to be here with you, and I've been already immensely blessed. I'm happy to be here to celebrate the 800 years of the Order of the Preachers with such rich history filled with blessings of the Dominicans around the globe. And I salute your ecumenical vision to have me here with you into this gathering. Thank you for welcoming me. Since our theme is gospel and encounter, I will describe in my short talk a variety of encounters. And I'll divide my talk in three parts. First, I will mention my own encounter with the Catholics and the Dominicans in Brazil, and then I will frame my work with a theme called Locus of Enunciation. And then I will bring, so that I can bring us into the encounter between Jesus and the Samaritan woman. So I come to this gathering as a Protestant who has had schizophrenic relations with Roman Catholics. I was born in Brazil, and my first encounter with Catholics was based on fear, while the second encounter, I would say, has been marked by deep gratitude. So let me explain. Growing up as a very conservative Protestant in a very small denomination called Presbyterians in an overwhelming Catholic country there, it was hard to keep my Protestant identity. And I grew up with this evangelistic zeal that I had to save souls, and everybody who didn't look like me, so that included surely the Catholics who needed to receive the word of salvation. And so this is a confession that I should have done with Father Jorge in private, but I'm opening my heart to you, and I hope for forgiveness. So there was one time, I was a teenager. I think I was 14 years old, and I went to the Basilica of Our Lady of Aparecida, Nossa Senhora de Aparecida, with a bunch of pamphlets trying to convert Catholics to Jesus. Yeah. I did that with other religions as well. But now that I see what is called the new Pentecostals growing by leaps and bounds with disastrous social, political consequences in my country, I'm now going back with Catholic pamphlets to try to get them back to the Catholic Church. My second encounter it was done through also the Catholics, brothers and sisters. My aunt was a nun. And also through my theological formations with theologians. I wouldn't be here if it was not, just to name a few Catholic theologians, among them Dominicans as well. Augustine, Master Eckhart, Hildegard von Bingen, Gustavo Gutierrez, Leonardo Boff, Juan Luis II, John Sobrino, Ivone Gebara, Dom Paulo Evaristo Arns, Dom Pedro Casaldáliga, Elizabeth Ann Johnson, Carl Runner, Antonio Vieira, John Baptist Metz, and my own PhD advisor, the Catholic nun Janet Walton, and the theologian Roger Haidt. They gave me an expensive grammar to my faith that I would not be able to be Christian without them. And the whole order of the Dominicans were fundamental to this history of the theological and social movements in Brazil. And they also have provided many encounters of transformation. And just to name one of them, there's so many. I had a whole list here. Because of time, I had to cut. Just to name one, that it has been a light in Brazil in this chaotic time that we are going through in Brazil. It is Frei Beto, a major, tireless public theologian preaching everywhere in Brazil with his books and articles and lectures, reminding us constantly of our commitments as Christians with the poor. The Dominican order in Brazil has done so much. Thomas Balduino followed the Las Casas and became the bishop of the indigenous people in a country that literally despises its native people, and created the Catholic Commission of Pastoral of the Land that many of my brothers from Brazil here also participate. In my view, perhaps one of the most important Christian institutions in Brazil that has fostered a fundamental work of action and resistance, supporting those who nobody cares. The indigenous people and the campesinos, all those associated with the land and agrarian reform in Brazil. Not only that, during the dictatorship, it was the work of many Dominicans who resisted the coup and placed resistance in a disastrous time. The Dominican Commission of Justice and Peace in Brazil has become the place where the love of God is manifested through the option of the poor and popular movements, and support the lives of those who are oppressed. Está bien. Now, it is from the work and voices of these Dominican brothers and sisters working with the poor, and hearing yesterday all the voices of the brothers and sisters working right there where nobody wants to be with the people, that I have my faith renewed day after day. From all of the thinkers and doers, I learned the importance of the place as I do theology, as I preach. And it is from this sense, since we're talking about encounter, we have always to talk about place, and that's why we heard so much today about place and space. And I wanted to talk about one aspect of it. The place from which I preach and the encounters created are vexed with power differentiation, histories of biases, liberations, local and global forms of knowledge. Walter Mignolo calls it the locus of enunciation. In his book, Local Histories, Global Designs, Mignolo says that the locus of elocution or enunciation is the entanglement of the geopolitics of our language, the ways in which place, space determines how knowledge is created, given meaning, organized, articulated, and so on. More now. From these forms of knowledge, encounters are shaped, politics are organized, and societies are designed. In every encounter between people, situations, and the gospel, there's always a need to wrestle with that locus of enunciation or elocution, of all of the sides entangled in this meeting, as we need to be aware of what kind of knowledge is shared, engaged, and preached. Since the gospel itself is an encounter, Emmanuel, God with us and the whole creation. As theologians, it is our task to interpret as we preach how Jesus, God with us, can be understood in and through human encounters, our limitations, contradictions, and possibilities. How should we consider the border between God with us and our locus of enunciation? how to preach about God when we hub the edges of a specific cultural and political context, portraying different cultural systems of language and religions, proper ethical codes, issues and laws, knowledge formation, and power dynamics. That's why we need to think about territory, because territory is more of a loaded sense of how to speak about space and place. They're loaded with forms of belonging, histories of ownership, stolen or given or organized by administrative jurisdiction and legislature, possessions, forms of autonomy, and power struggle. The territory carries within itself a form of community in a certain grammar of knowledge. Thus, encounters inevitably bring the awareness of one's locus of enunciation, and that gathering around it that highlights differences which in response can either close fences, create relations of anger, resentment, fear, and violence, or it can stretch a tent where we can live inside. For the translators, I'm skipping one paragraph. Can we engage into encounters? You didn't need to translate, but it's okay. Yes, it's okay. Yeah, we all follow everything. That's right. Can we engage in encounters that entail what Jean-Luc Nancy calls being with? How do we engage our diverse loci of elocutions with all these complexities around irreducible differences that we have by honoring God and one another, and then preparing the way for others to come? It is with these questions that I now want us to think about the Gospel of St. John, chapter 4, verses 1 to 30, the encounter between Jesus and the Samaritan woman. It is this encounter between that woman and Jesus that shakes some of the social, political, and religious conventions of that time. There was a strife between the Samaritans and the Jews. Gail O'Day says the breach between Samaritans and Jews derived from Assyrian occupation of northern Palestine 700 years before Christ's era. You can see that in 2 Kings 17. But this breach intensified 200 years before Christ's era in a dispute over location of the cultic center. The Samaritans built a shrine on Mount Gerizim and claimed that this shrine, not Jerusalem temple, was the center of the cultic life. Jewish troops destroyed the shrine of Mount Gerizim in 128 before Christ's era. And the rift between the two groups continued into Jesus' day. In addition, Jews and Samaritans disagreed over what constituted authoritative scripture, with the Samaritans accepting only the Pentateuch as authoritative. A tough situation. Both of them thought that the other group was the schematic one. For both Samaritans and Jews, the question of the cultic space was central to their faith. So much that the location of the worship blurred important themes such as nation identity, religious orthodoxy, faith proper, political recognition, and all ethnic considerations. So it is in the midst of this strife that Jesus meets the Samaritan woman. And what is at stake here is not the sinfulness of this woman and how Jesus saved her from impurity. That's not the point. Instead, when Jesus hears her story, he does not condemn her, but starts saying, what you say is true. The women at that time were objects of transactions in a patriarchal society, not much different from our times. However, this unnamed woman engages Jesus in theological discussions and asks him about the right place for worship. Jesus steps back into his own ethnicity, keeping the wall of separation between the Jews and the Samaritans, when he says, "You worship what you do not know, and we worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews." Jesus' locus of elocution or enunciation associates true worship with a proper knowledge of God that can only be found within the Jews. However, as the conversation goes on, Jesus breaks down these walls and offers a new space of worship, a space for anyone saying, "The hour is coming, and it is now here, when the true worshipers will worship God in spirit and truth. For God seeks such as these to worship him." In other words, neither your or my faith, but a shared practice of faith, for God is always elsewhere. At the end, what matters in this passage is what began the conversation. And what began the conversation was a personal need. Jesus was thirsty, right? This is the heart of the locus of enunciation. Jesus needed water, and she had the tools to get the water. What creates the encounters and propitiates their conversation was a common human need, where both needed to respond. At that point, former proper knowledges were broken, and the end result was that they both blessed each other. Had they started in their own beliefs as the locus of enunciation, they would be prone to defend themselves rather than blessing each other. It is after that need that they have a common place where they engage in necessary complexities of their own historical differences. In the same way, the Dominicans in Brazil created hundreds of thousands of encounters and everywhere around the globe. Because you have heard people saying, "I'm thirsty." And you have created the conditions for the need to be met. And that is a methodology of theology for our encounters. We start where it hurts. That's the methodology of liberation theology. We start where it hurts, in our hunger, in our thirst, in our wound, where we are all vulnerable. It is both our vulnerable places, inside and outside of ourselves, that we create a third space. A space that is both ours, but none of ours. It is in that messy territory, yet to be built and organized, where God lives. And we have to figure it out together. So our locus of enunciation, once a singular locus, becomes a plural foreign common space, with a variety of enunciations transversing each other. What was once only mine or yours, now it is mine and yours. A singular, plural, foreign, common place of inhabitants. And after we meet, we are all changed. Concluding, at the well, It is there at the well, at this unknown and dangerous crossroads, with familiar and strange faces, with concrete sacred liturgical objects such as the well, the water, and the cup, that the theological discourse is constructed, where the silver line is braided into the texture of our lives, where a well is dug, where a common oikos is built. To finish, Nancy Pereira Cardoso, a biblicist and theologian from Brazil, tells us these things about this encounter. She says, two strangers, he and she, they were not supposed to meet each other. There was no common space, a reason, or a why. The point of encounter, a well, and they have different thirsts. She was a woman, he was a man. He a Jew, even from Galilee. She a Samaritan. He a passerby, she a resident. But at that moment, they were both vulnerable in the presence of each other. She and he. He is passing through a known place alone in a strange land. She is familiar with the territory. A territory is made of relations. They are both so alone that the social and relational markers of the territory are suspended. A man and a woman meet each other at the well, and their relation was the water. And the theology of this encounter has its own liturgy. First, they introduce themselves to each other by establishing the need. Then let each other know their differences as they move around with the heavy furniture of the past. The concrete ground now can be shared. They make themselves finally present to each other. They see, and they let each other be seen. At the second moment, there was an affirmation of faith. We are humans, and we share the world. They recognize each other by the concrete presence of what sustained their lives, the water. On a third moment comes the word. It comes a necessary conversation, a dialogue with precision of their words. Words that do not negate the conflict. The word that do not fear problems and questions. Here is the itinerary from life to theology. Then they agree that what he and she have in common is the desire for the well, for the water. Beyond the name of the well, its history or its control. They want to be in the same territory, re-signifying identities, offering gains and new subjectivities and relations, and making history. God with us. Neither here nor there, but somewhere in between where we are, which is the best place for adoration. And then there is the fourth and last moment, the moment for commitment. I give you my cup, and I call my people. I introduce my friends to you, and I kiss your cup. I recognize you, and I call you mine. We offer ourselves to each other, and an offering that creates the territory where we can finally worship God. Community. Our places, our encounters are like the well in the gospel text, a place for unexpected encounters, for gathering of strangers, the sharing of water, food, and wisdom. At that place, you tell me about you. I kiss your cup. We call upon God's name together. And in Jesus, we worship God and learn to share this blessed, tough, graceful, difficult, and revolving territory world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudio, for the presentation that you has fostered a word of God in us. I momentarily thought, what would it have been like if you had not been born in Brazil? In other words, how does culture and conditions shape our message? I remind those who are connecting by means of Facebook and Twitter and YouTube that they may direct their questions to hashtag OP800. And now we give the floor to Madame Natalia Plié, who will speak with us of a new place, a new locus, the world of technologies, and how to take advantage of them so that they might have true spaces of communication and personal encounter at the service of evangelization.
Good evening. Just to begin the agreement, my method of preaching is that it doesn't exist. It's a place, but at the same time, it's useful. It's the internet. It's a place, but also a tool to meet people, and so we can really see what people say and try in their relation with the other. The method to upload, to transmit the most precious knowledge of Christ. You know that the challenges are presented. However, in regard to the holy story, finally, all of the story of humanity is a dialogue with God. This history with God is so to arrive to communication with what is sacred. And for this, we use two methods that are the absurd and the desirable. The absurd is a space that is easy and spontaneous because it's man, I explain. The more absurd, and by the same good, the innocent who the more. Without doubt, the central point that's most absurd, but yet the most beautiful of God's relationship with humanity, is that there are other examples that I like very much. The book of Ezekiel. The book of Ezekiel, if you remember, in chapter 4, the director of École Biblique's next to me. I think it's chapter 4. Ezekiel says, Israel understands nothing, but I'm going to explain very simply. You leave the town with a brick that has the destination Israel, and you wait for 40 days, 80 days with this, and when you pass through Israel and spend 40 days on the other side. When you come back, you take the excrement of a cow and excrement of a human, and then make a cake. Finally, you take it on your head, and you put it on your head. You tear your clothes, and then there you are. Let you visualize the scene. It's in obviously prophetic language. There are in these scenes of the Bible a germ, a seed that all have a need for evangelization in the world. Who not have a life or a conscience or a need for Jesus. The internet, as we said earlier, is a tool and a place. To say that it's no doubt a useful tool, and always the experience of the evangelization shows itself like a place, because a place that is different from the world that we live in. The fundamental difference, it is a world, many, many worlds that are near to us. We spoke about this in the workshop, and also we will tomorrow. I just want to advertise that. That is, the algorithms that we use, that one comes to in the internet, a little to adapt a virtual world to that seems more like us. We always have the tendency for a world that seems nearer than it is different. Except that in RV there is no an invisible hand that eliminates all the choices, the things that we need. What happens in the internet? You finish by not going to the places that if you were a Christian, you go to a suggestion or Facebook or the same profession or a Christian like you who have as friends. They think the same as you, and so it's very annoying, boring, because the evangelization, preaching, is always to go to others who are different. And we need to go to others who are different, not to those who are similar, and that are more like us. And it's like two balls that or two places that are different sites. At this moment, the choice that God makes for the absurd and desirable. Another passage of the Bible, there's the mad of the world, or the crowd of the world, is that those that God chooses. I've experimented with great strength. I have the responsible for the communication for the Diocese of Lyon. The Archbishop is Cardinal Philippe. You spoke of Iraq, Jean-Jacques, earlier. There is in 2014. There was a few articles in French newspapers. What has happened in Iraq and the way in which there is a space and the issue of Al-Qaeda, and people don't know very much. They're already Islamic, and it's a country that is not religiously free. At that time, the advice, the Episcopal Council wanted to know how to find in the world those things that it's very complicated for the Christians, but also for the other religious minorities who are already becoming persecuted as well. And the reaction to the Monsignor was immediate. We must do something. It's very interesting with the following discussion about in the council. What can we do? The immediate response, spontaneous, of everybody is to say we must have a tribune in the biggest newspaper, and we are in France. There is when we have a serious problem, we must write to the newspaper. Well, they wrote to the newspaper that the world attentive to the Christian, even if the Christian don't write, and it's not the intellectual content of Christianity is not something that is popular. So the reaction of the Council of the Archbishop is what sort of to create a sort of wave of compassion among for the problems of the world, nothing the African Muslims, the difficulty of the Christians in situations that are extremely challenging. That Jesus was like a man alone, weak, who was at a distance, and until death, he had to go. And for Jesus, he had to do that simply to love his brothers who were there. And so we said to the Cardinal, you must find a place, a means for the weak, protected by the armed forces, and that can face truly something for the smallest. Something for the smallest of which people have not thought. The Feast of the Immaculate Conception was the next feast. It is a feast which is known in the entire world. The light illuminated by the Holy Virgin. Towards the refugees. I spoke once of the Christians, but now I'll speak of everyone. And our experience is that this image of the absurd had promoted a wave of compassion that to help those in the most difficult parts of the world. The ball that we spoke of earlier. Never forget that the missionary that went before, and for the internet today, it's the same thing. What did the missionaries do that preceded us? The first thing they did is to learn the long language. And after that, when they had learned the language, they did not preach. They built a school, they built a pharmacy. It was to be at the service of those who came in their poverty, but they loved them. On the internet, we have an advantage, invitation today to do this exactly the same thing, which are the needs that the man today expresses the social networks. Not to have immediate needs that are satisfied by, but the fundamental needs, and also there is a fractioning, a fissure in the social networks. It's more segmented for everybody, more the total number of followers, and more segments of marketing. that is more divided into little pieces, and the Christians are one of these segments, and then the Lord, and then the brothers. How do we achieve? What do we do to achieve to come to understand that the fundamental needs? We come to seek in the social networks, and we seek people, is really to meet, is to encounter. It's a very simple rule for this. Presence of Christian associations always so the most possible is that to the social networks is a truth, a true name. We will have a pseudonym now on social networks, and there we are. I don't want to repeat myself, but to say, in fact, quickly, the name disappears. It's a place par excellence called a virtual place, but one that we await. And a person is extremely incarnated, but does not move, does not encounter. This is the mission of preaching. The real person preaching to a real person. We need to find a way on the internet, on the social networks, in truth, to identify and to be identified, to be incarnated. And the solution is to close the computer quite quickly. On the social networks, we encounter people that we would have never met otherwise in any other way. But the first encounter, thanks to very quickly, truly, we ask that as Jesus asked to encounter people in truth, have a message saying, well, you live in Rome, and I'm here to Rome for the closing Congress of the Jubilee at 2017. Would you like to have a coffee and encounter and have a discussion? While this de-virtualization of the conversation for someone on the social networks, there is a certain number of things, notably aggressiveness. We know this is true. The social networks are where the people can be very aggressive, and if they meet the people with which they speak, they have less aggressiveness, and quite quickly they can speak to each other. And if you close the computer and look for apostolate with the people, to have with yourself an activity that's extremely incarnated. Cannot pass too much time in this world to become an evangelizing person, and you can evangelize.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Talia, for sharing not only your experience, but also your deep reflection on the uses and challenges represented by new technologies. The session began a little later than anticipated. The presentations took a little more time than anticipated, but We hope not to take too much longer from what was planned. And so we're going to now open the dialogue, questions that you might ask, and will end at 16 hours and 50 at 4:50 p.m. I remind you that questions may be asked both by those present here and by internet, by those who have followed the session on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. We repeat something that was recommended. What is recommended is that these be questions, not comments, and that the questions be formulated in a brief manner so that with clarity the interpreters may translate them into the appropriate languages. Questions may be directed to one or all of those who have addressed us. And so the microphone is available, and whoever wishes to speak, please raise your hand. For Jean-Jacques, in Spanish. First, I admire the work that you realize and the work accomplished by Brother Pablo. For us, I don't know, perhaps most of us, the problem is not so much in the being present in the Muslim world, but rather the problem presented today by Muslims who come to us, not just to Europe, but also today and increasingly to Latin America, in conditions sometimes as refugees, other times as immigrants. How the concrete question is how to accomplish encounter with the other when concretely it is they who come to our countries with their own demands, to be respected. Not, when they say, don't wear crosses, don't have any religious symbols that go against their own religious sensibilities. Thank you.
Oui, c'est certain.
Yes, certainly. It's one of the great transformations of our globalized society, our globalized world. It's that the other is no longer in another place. And I could take the freedom, have the freedom to go there or not to his place. The great change in the world is that the other now comes to me. And in addition to this possibility of transport and communication, the differences and the gaps in human development, the indicators of human development which are calculated by the United Nations, which includes not just economic level but also freedoms, education and so on. These divides, gaps today in humanity. There's a great movement of migrants from lesser developed countries because of wars and deprivation towards countries which are judged, sometimes wrongly, to be more advantaged. And today we confront a great movement which will only increase, because after refugees of war of these decades, we will also see climate change refugees. So we should expect great movements of migrants which will effectively organize or affect. Walls don't help much. They slow things down. There are physical walls. There are juridical walls. But we can't really stop completely these migrations. Perhaps we could organize it better. But in any case, when I look at Europe, turning itself into a fortress. I think this fortress will fall like the walls of Jericho. So we need to prepare ourselves, yes, to prepare ourselves to live with the other and with the other in our place. This does not mean without conditions. Canadians have a formula or a motto. The Francophone Canadians talk about reasonable accommodation. What is reasonable for us to accept in our societies to allow the diversity of the other? I think that this should be a debate in our societies, for example, here in the West, in Europe, but a debate that is reasonable, as peaceful as possible. Because often, sadly, these debates are driven by fear. At the moment, we have elections in Europe, in France, this year, next year, and so on. In Germany, sorry. The great questions put forward by politicians in these debates are questions on identity, national identity. Who are we? Can the others come to us? We talk about young youth unemployment, problems of drugs. We have a certain approach to the other, which is driven by fear. And here again, I think it's very important that we begin by taking ourselves coming out of our fear and begin to look at the other as he is, to dare to meet him. And it's a brother of my province who works with the Romani, who are very gypsies, who are very bad, the gypsies, as he says, who are very badly viewed in our society. But they are human beings. And so I think we need to go beyond our fears and dare to really encounter them. A physical encounter, as Natalie was saying, to come out of the bubbles, to go and meet people. And in the end, I think that we have to respect who we are, what our societies are, their values. We have points of reference. And I'm not in favor that for us, our societies, Western societies, to take out our crosses from our public spaces, if this is our tradition, to have them in our public spaces. That would be an abuse, and I'm not happy with that. That we expect public swimming pools to have separate hours for men and women. That's not part of our patrimony culturally. We have a mix with a mutual respect. So we have to find a place where we can put that cursor in a just way. It's often not put in the right place. It's often put in a fearful way through ideology and political manipulation, and also religious.
Charles.
En español.
In Spanish. I'm Andrés Valencia, a professor from Valencia, Spain. A question for Professor Claudio, if it's to be understood. I'm here, over here. The light is probably bothering you, but I'm here. If it's to be understood that you belong to the Presbyterian Church, I appreciate your presentation and your testimony. Very interesting, very biblically grounded. But I'm concerned about a context, something that concerns the context of Latin America and particularly Brazil. What is the reception, or how is it received? Are the documents, the theological documents, received? The documents of the mixed commissions, in which the Catholic Church has an important role with other confessions, and also within the World Council of Churches. Father Jorge belongs to one such important commission. So how are these documents received? is there knowledge of these documents so that later on that encounter may really impact and come alive with a theological basis with which the various churches at these high levels speak? Thank you.
Gracias, hermano, pero...
Thank you, brother. I'm going to speak in English because my Spanish is a suffering.
I think that the fundamental issues of all of our churches is the thinking and the doing, right? The orthopraxy and the orthodoxa, right? They move along together, and I think based on that we have both the wisdom of some places where the communities are already wrestling with issues that our commissions go to work later. But there's also a need for these documents to come also to the communities. In Latin America, what we have seen is the impoverishment of the theological education. And due to that, and the conservatism of some Protestant churches also, that it will not bring those documents down to the local churches, and that is for me one of the disasters, is the impoverishment of the theological discussion, the theological formation. Churches don't have much money, and so now every church has its own formation, and even some historical Protestant churches who would have the means to deal with those documents, some of them are moving away from the ecumenical discussions because of its theological situations. So I do see those documents as fundamental. But I see also a gap between those commissions and the people at the base to actually make this conversation happen in a more thorough way. What I've seen in some, not the new Pentecostal churches, but the Protestant churches, I've seen that sometimes the local churches are more expensive theologically than some of its leaderships as well. So I wonder how we can create the channel of this movement back and forth between the praxis and the theological documents that we spend so much time to do and to create. And I don't know how even in my church in Brazil, I don't see those documents circulating either. Does that answer you, my brother?
We have 3 requests for the floor, 1, 2, and Victor 3.
In English. Of course, I agree with Father Chris McAvey. Pakistan is a great country to live in. We having dialogue with the Muslims in Pakistan at 2 levels. First is the scholarly level, where the intellectuals and the scholars, they come together and have dialogue. And it goes very calmly. They quote the scriptures and everything. So it looks like very calm situation and very loving atmosphere. But when we come to the grassroots level, the level of the ordinary people, they are very loving, very calm, and very cooperative. But whenever the situation comes of the blasphemy law, they immediately become very irrational, at times intolerant, and very hostile. So my question to Father John Jackson is this: how to come back in such situations. What must be our approach and the action or the measures to take in such situations when people become so hostile, so irrational.
Please, favor, it's possible to move a little on your right, because from here with the light it's almost impossible to see you. It's a kind of transfiguration. Yeah.
Je vais répondre sans...
I will reply without looking to you, because it hurts my eyes too much. You're too shiny. I said in a very quick way, perhaps, in my comments, rather positive comments on the encounter with the other. I was trying constantly to keep in my spirit and my heart the suffering of those I have met and who live in difficult situations, the tears of our brothers and sisters in Iraq and of their families. Our communities have been dispersed and ravaged, and I have been in your country, in Pakistan, where a bishop committed suicide, Bishop Jean Joseph, whom I knew, president of the Justice and Peace Commission in Pakistan. He committed suicide out of despair, facing this question of the blasphemy law. I had met him. So I'm truly trying never to be ironical, never to forget this weight of suffering, of pain and difficulty. What can I say? The first thing is perhaps to observe that the Muslim world is today shaken up and crisscrossed by very terrible crises. There are currents of thought, Wahhabism, for example, a radical reforming Islam coming from Saudi Arabia, which has spread throughout all the Middle East and Africa because of money and petrodollars. In your country, there is an author, Al-Dudi, who has spread an ideology which is Islamist, very conservative. These currents threaten us. They threaten our liberties, the liberties of Christians, but they also threaten the majority of Muslims who do not see themselves in this Islam, which is hateful, violent, aggressive, and xenophobic. So we have to try hard to give our hands, to offer our hands to possible Muslim partners with whom we could try to work on these questions. What is religious liberty? What is the possibility of living with another who is different? The Dominican community in Cairo, where I lived for 15 years and which today is doing a splendid work of which I'm very proud, has just signed a convention, an agreement with the Islamic University at Al-Azhar, which has taken 12 years. It's been very complicated, precisely to think about these questions with the Muslims. What does it mean? What do these fundamentalist questions mean? They are not the only ones to have fundamentalist offshoots. There are also fundamentalist offshoots with the Hindus and even with Christians. It's a kind of sickness for religion, within religion. But despite the wounds and the fears, we should try to keep a cool head and to work intelligently, to try to understand, to take apart by piece these ideologies threatening us. The second thing, I think, But here we're talking about Christianity, and it's becoming irrational, as Natalie said, is that there is the difference between those who threaten us and we who are sometimes threatening, is that we, in our messages, in the heart of Christianity, there is also forgiveness. There is also the text of the Passion of Christ, and Jesus was silent. Jesus tacebat. He did not reply to violence with violence. It was a great challenge, evangelical challenge to us, a gospel challenge, to stay a loving presence, to be a loving presence which dares to forgive despite injustices. Doesn't mean we accept everything. We have to fight for our rights. But at the same time, what marks out Christianity is this, is that we can not only pray for victims, but we can always pray for their good.
My question also is directed to Brother Jean-Jacques. I come from the community of Saint Dominic from Murcia in Spain, where founded by Saint Raymond of Peñafort, precisely for dialogue with Islam. Tunis, Spain, and Murcia. Spain was dominated by Islam for 700 years by weapons and politics. Currently, Spain and all of Europe is in the danger of being dominated by Islam because of the multiplication of and proselytism and demographic multiplication. Do you believe that, Jean-Jacques, that are we in a equality of even ground for dialogue, or do they have more strength than we do because they don't understand what forgiveness is, or many of them what it is to respect other religions? We're all infidels except for them.
C'est en effet une...
Yes, indeed, it's a reality in today's Europe, this presence, growing presence of migrants, immigrants who are Muslim, who might be thought ordinary people who want to pray. They ask for a mosque, and after all, to have a place of prayer is legitimate. But others among them claim, in a very clear way, their identity, Muslim identity, to impose it on others, and perhaps because they feel so non-integrated and unwelcome that it's a way of existing. I think of certain great Muslim preachers in Europe who have often had great successes precisely because they have, in the suburbs, they have people listen to them, people who have no place in our society. Facing this challenge, I think there are several responses. Firstly, let's not give in to fear. Let's not accept the brainwashing of our media, from our media, who make us see risks which sometimes don't exist at all. I come from a small village in Brittany, a Catholic village, where the parish priest decided to offer a house to immigrants, whoever they are, Christian or Muslim. And there's actually no Muslims in our place. We're not like Spain. And the Christians organized themselves. There's a house, and my own mother has given a bed, and we all gave our beds. But the mayor said never. There would never be an Arab in my commune. The manipulation. So the first thing is let's not give in to fear. Secondly, there's a great challenge in education. We lived in Egypt. We saw that the living together of Muslims and Christians was much easier in the areas, the town areas, where there were better educated people than in the poor suburbs or in the villages in Upper Egypt, which were very impoverished. So there, too, let's not imagine there is a religious aggression, which is maybe perhaps just a lack of education, a lack of formation. We see in Egypt as well a Christian fundamentalism, which is Coptic, sometimes linked to a lack of education among those Christians. So I think we have this challenge of education. And also in the West, since we're talking about the West, Westerners have a need to... we have a duty to welcome and to educate and to give decent accommodation, and otherwise these people would be in impoverished ghettos, and this would be a territory where they would increase their Islamist propaganda. Thirdly, I come back to the question, where are we going in the dialogue? I think when men and women have dared to meet one another, there can be personal stories that are incredibly surprising. People who, in the end, say, oh, he's not so scary as all that. They're not so threatening. Or the Christians are not so unfaithful, infidel as we thought. They pray like us. One of the difficulties in the West is that our churches are empty. And so we complain that the mosques are full. But my problem really is, first of all, is that the churches are empty. So I think that there is a real question which is thrown back at us, painfully, by those practicing Muslims to us, Westerners, where religion has departed, except in some oases that remain. So that's my response to a complex question.
Nos quedan 7 minutos.
We have 7 more minutes to finish the session. Therefore, there are 2 requests for the floor.
My question is to Father Jean-Jacques. I really appreciate all that you said yesterday and also today. And I thank the Master of the Order and all the commissions for this great conference. I really enjoy it. I thank those who also paid for my ticket and for the food I'm eating here and drinking. Thank you all. But my question is it advantageous to continue dialoguing with the Muslim? Because they do not believe in dialogue. What they believe in monologue, to force whatever they want you to believe on you. And our dialogue is going on the intellectual level among the elites, and it's not producing much fruit. Where the action rests is in the grassroots. It is there when you hear Al-Hakubaru, they will respond. And if they pronounce jihad, just say, Al-Hakubaru, Al-Hakubaru, somebody is blaspheming against Muhammad here. No one cares to investigate anything among them. That person will be killed. Some people were killed recently in Nigeria. A Christian was in his own shop, a Muslim came and put mat there and continued to pray. And the Christian said, look, you cannot do this. This is a shop. This is not a mosque. And then just took club, the woman ran, they killed her. And what's the next thing to do? You say, okay, look for justice. Then you go to court, and the court declared that there's no case. So how do you talk with those kind of people? And here you are welcoming them. It is very charitable. It's a good thing. But charity must also be practiced with prudence. They are going to take over your young girls. They will marry your young girls, and they will produce many, many children. Islam has hidden agenda about conquering the world. So what are we going to do about that as Dominicans? If a prince in Arab proclaims jihad today, all of them will join. They will say it is in the Quran. And before the fundamentalists, everybody is an infidel. If you are called an infidel, you have become a dog that has become mad. So the next thing is you should be killed. So, Father, help us. Should we continue this dialogue, or we just insist on respecting each other's view, coexistence?
Je suis allé il y a quelques années.
I went a few years ago to Nigeria. In fact, Bishop Amere was not yet bishop there. He was still master of students at Abidjan. And I remember this visit. What I saw, what I observe is that there are situations that have degenerated in the last years. Boko Haram, for example, in your country, has been a terrible, tragic drama with these young girls kidnapped and so on. And tragically, this is a situation we find in other countries today, Somalia, Sudan. We're in a period, a time when a kind of a sick illness, a disease in our contemporary culture, as though the dominant secularism in the world, the economicization or commodification of things, and the deteriorating relationships between people throws us back a kind of boomerang in a really aggressive religiousness, which is disrespectful. We have to speak about respect. Yes, we have to. But again, I will say, our societies in the West must be questioned about what they have become by this return, very large return of religiousness, sometimes very violently, which is violent religiousness, which is not always violent. So I think we have to understand this question and to accompany, as much as we can, although it's difficult, to accompany the Muslims that we know in a certain critical work. We're in a very difficult time. There were years, 20, 30 years ago, when encounter was much easier. The Père Anawati, who founded the Dominican Institute in Cairo, had Muslim dialogue partners with whom he had an intelligent and peaceful dialogue. That was possible because we were not in a period of heightened sensibilities. And now in Egypt, we find it very difficult to find dialogue partners among the Muslims. Not just because of their fanaticism, but because of their lack of cultural openness. Those who were formed in Saudi Arabia, which gives bursaries because they have so much money, are very different from the partners who spoke with Anawati 30, 40 years ago, who did their theses in Louvain or Oxford. There is a disease in the contemporary Muslim world, but there is also a contemporary a disease in our Western world which thought it could get rid of religion. So I think there's a great question that's philosophical, that's put to us today. What shall we do? Well, we have to resist, we have to try and work intelligently. And are we foolish? Probably, but Jesus was as well.
Final question.
It's not a question. Victor from Switzerland. Since Claudio mentioned it, I wanted to say I came to this Congress not only with the theater, but with a marvelous book by Frei Beto, Aldeia do Silêncio, who tells us a lot about encounter. It was a wonderful privilege to work with our group of people of theater. I've had many, many discussions with them, and I would just want to quote one sentence I read. This is Nancy Woodard. She is the founderess of Action Theater, and she said, "You have to embody yourself before you can embody somebody else." And the last sentence is to honor an expression that Timothy liked very much. It's by a Bavarian comedian. "Tonight I'm going home, we will see whether I am at home.
Merci. Avant de finir, il y a...
Thank you. Before finishing, there are a few questions about the internet. Your question?
We are asked nowadays that young people have a great deal of mixture of beliefs and philosophies, and that this provokes in them an instability in their faith. The question is how to work on the question of identity and the sense of belonging. It doesn't say to whom is the question, so perhaps it's to several of you.
Claudio, perdón.
To Claudio, sorry.
There is this one thing, at least in the United States, that is called the politics of difference, and where we have minorities trying to find their own identities and developing their own sense of who they are. And I love the fact that Edward Said has this word that we have to do an excavation of ourselves in order to find who we are and what have been placed upon us in our history, in the history of our people, so we can find the better sources of where we belong to, especially if you live under 500 years of colonization. So there's this sense in which you have to excavate, to do work with your own self, to find the many voices and the many selves inside of yourself. But I think that to stay within that sense of identity only, it is a work of fear when I cannot move beyond my own sense of self, and when I stay within the cluster of my own people. I think and I think this is one of the gifts of Christianity, is to give a sense of who we are, of our belonging, and our baptismal belonging. And to the point that when I ask to whom I belong to this group, but I belong elsewhere. So our belonging is always in between places. It's having had this experience of living United States now for 17 years, I have this clear sense that I do not belong either in Brazil or United States, but I do belong to both, but I don't. It is, and this is a place, I think this is a place that carries mixed blessings. But I believe it's a fantastic place when you are always with this possibility of finding yourself in somebody else's. Now, for instance, I'm being in the United States, I was able to meet the black community in the United States. That helped me to meet my black community in Brazil as well. And I think because of the work of the Spirit in us, we work from a place of freedom. I grew up with this fear of somebody else, fear with the Catholics, fear with the African religions, fear with everybody. So I had to go into destroying them before they destroy me. But now I think because I have my Jesus, I can go anywhere. I can belong anywhere. I can have double, triple belongings because I know where I come from. So once we get to that point of dealing with our own self in terms of a multiple identities, so our belonging becomes also multiple and plural.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Claudio.
Cerramos este
We now close this panel, and perhaps if there is a very brief word with which one of you would like to close the panel. At the same time, let these words be provocative and inspiring to continue our reflection tomorrow as planned by the Congress.
In order to, we would need our friend Paul from Tehran to be president to show the true complexity of a complex Muslim world which we fear. In 2 minutes, I'll try and say what I've lived through with him. He suggests that I go to Qum, which is the Vatican of Egypt. There are all the great universities of Shiism, to speak to doctoral students in the universities of the religions. And I spoke to them about Christian monarchism in Egypt. And they were very interested to discover that, monasticism. Christian monasticism was born in this Arab country. A very beautiful encounter. And at the end of this encounter, someone said to me, Monsieur le Professeur, Mr. Professor, the president of the university would like to receive you. So I go into the office of the president of the university. We speak for half an hour in Arabic, because I don't know Persian and he doesn't know English. A very nice kind of conversation. And at the end he says, Mr. Professor, I would like to give you a gift. So I get up and he gives me a book. It's very surprising. He offers me the Catechism of the Catholic Church, translated into Persian by his university. And he explains to me that in his University of the Religions, they have this project to translate many dozens of works from the Catholic Church, from Vatican II, from the Church Fathers, because he said, we want to understand your faith in the way that you yourselves express it, and not in the way that we ourselves are used to deconstruct or deform it. Imagine that this country of ancient culture could be a country. This is a country which the West has ostracized, and we've put sanctions on them, and we've considered them in a very as stupid and fanatical. Yet this is one of the richest countries in terms of minority religious groups under Islam. So here we have a lot of work to do at home.
This is the final word of the panel. Many thanks to all of you. And now we close the panel and create a space for some announcements. While we show our gratitude to our partners, our colleagues, our sisters and brothers, before going to the coffee break, let's listen to some important announcements regarding the cultural trip to the synagogue. And then after we finish, we will continue with the coffee break and the pilgrimage. Orlando and Darren, and then I'll end with some announcements. Thank you very much, Sabi. You now have some time to tranquilly take your coffee in the three indicated areas, as we have been doing. The persons who registered this morning to go to the synagogue should meet at 5:30 at the door of the university, what's called the cancello, or the iron gate. Our outing to the synagogue, our guide to the synagogue will be our lay Dominican Ruth Ann Henderson. She is our guide to the synagogue. The path is about maybe 12 minutes or so, and around 5:20 they will be waiting for you for the visit. Second announcement, whoever has not yet registered is invited to the General Secretariat. Thank you very much.
I just have one short thing. Sorry, before you go. I know it's been long. On behalf of the scientific committee, one of our tasks is to and somehow share the fruits of our collective reflection and dialogue. Or maybe I should do it another time. Okay. You know what? I'll make the announcement tomorrow. It's probably easier because people are ready to go. So I'll do it tomorrow morning. So what are you going to do?